Up till now, I've been talking about environmental engineering in the context of niche engineering. That's when the activities of bees or bees or any organism are affecting the reproduction and survival of others, not themselves. And this also, when you think about this niche concept, the Hutchinson niche was one where the organisms were adapting to all these external factors. The external factors were basically what formed the niche, and they are adapting to find their place in that niche. The niche construction, when you start looking at it, this is now where the activities of the individuals are actually affecting their own niches. So this is sort of an addition to it and makes it a more dynamic kind of a definition. So niche construction is when the activities of bees affect their own reproduction and survival of that of their descendants. So again, before we were talking about the effect of bees on niches of others, and now we're going to talk about niche construction, which is the effect of bees' activities on their own reproduction and survival, or that of their descendants. So the most obvious thing is bees engineer their nest environment. This is an obvious niche construction activity. They construct and maintain the nest. They process and store food. They protect against nest decomposition. They protect against diseases and intruders. And they control the temperature and humidity of the nest. They are sheltering themselves from the external environment by engineering their own nest environment niche. Female reproduction in honeybees is the act of swarming. A colony will divide in half, roughly, where half the individuals will. I'm not talking about the combs and things dividing in half, but the population will divide in half. Half the workers will fly away with the mother queen. The other half will remain in the nest with all the combs and the brood and the stored food, and they remain behind with their sister, who becomes a queen. Then the half with the mother queen, it has to go find a new nest site and found a new nest. The optimal nest site, when they're looking for a place to move to, so they're going to be moving from one site into another, what they're looking for when they move to the new nest site has certain design principles. First of all, it must be defensible. They need to construct something that they're able to defend because they have a lot of rich resources. The bees themselves are high protein. The larvae are even higher in fat and protein. And also they have all those stores of honey and pollen, which for many different types of predators, that's a very attractive resource. It must be sufficiently insulated that they can thermoregulate it. Because bees are social thermoregulators. We thermoregulate our body. They don't thermoregulate their own bodies very much. They can to some extent, but they regulate the temperature of the nest through social activities and social mechanisms. And it must be able to accommodate the structure of the nest. And most of these nests contain about 8 vertical combs that are parallel, and so they need to be able to accommodate the nest itself. Because you need to think about a nest as really a nest is a factory within a fortress. Inside is the factory where they're making bees and they're procuring honey and whatnot, turning nectar into honey. And then the fortress is what they have to defend that keeps out the intruders. So the typical wild hive, if you went out and assessed the natural hives in the environment, the typical one would be about 40 to 45 liters in volume, and it was previously used. So when they move into a new space, very often it will already have had a colony in it that had left or died or something. They'll still have certain parts of the construction of the original nest will still be there. It has to have sufficient integrity not to be leaky. It can't have wind blowing through it. It can't be situated someplace where the rain will wash in it all the time. So it has to be a sound structure. Typically these are hollowed out trees, but it could be the wall of a house. Sometimes they'll nest in holes in the ground if they're the right dimensions and whatnot. Typically it will be a south-facing entrance. It'll be facing south because in the northern hemisphere, that's where in the wintertime, that's where the sun is going to be shining in on the hive, and that helps warm it. The entrance will typically be near the bottom of the nest. So you've got the nest here. The entrance will be typically near the bottom, and about 12.5 to 75 centimeters squared. So this gives it the size that can be defended easily, but also they need to have an entrance near the bottom because the colder air will float down to the bottom. It's easier to ventilate the nest. Moisture, it's easier to get rid of the moisture that builds up inside of the nest with a bottom entrance. And the entrance needs to be high up in a tree. So typically they will nest in the ground if under certain circumstances, but typically they're found higher up in the tree, and that shields them or protects them from ground-dwelling predators. Nest construction has to be done quickly. They're in a race because when they swarmed here, when the colony divided in half, there could be anywhere from 10 to 20,000 workers. Workers will live, somewhere 3 to 6 weeks, depending on the time of year. So immediately the population starts dwindling because they're going to be dying every day after they swarm. And then if a queen started laying eggs immediately, if say they moved into a nest and they were able to very quickly provide some combs and the queen laid in it, it would be 21 days before any new bees emerged, because that's how long it takes to go from egg to adult. It's 21 days. But initially, there's not going to be very many eggs laid, so there's going to be more dying than are born. So you're going to continue down to this low point, this nadir, and then enough bees will start emerging that you can start building your population up again. So they have to do this quickly. And it turns out that about 90% of the nest is constructed in around 45 days. It's a very rapid construction project, an engineering feat. The construction of the new nest begins with a massive demolition project. The bees move into the new structure. If it's a tree, say a hollow tree cavity, they'll go in and they'll start stripping out the fungus and the molds and things that had actually hollowed it out. They get rid of that because they don't want it to continue to deteriorate the integrity of the tree. They strip it out and then they coat it with propolis. This is a sticky resinous substance that they collect from trees, tree resins, etc., that they then make into propolis. And they smear this all over the inside and line the inside of the cavity with this propolis to protect it against mold and fungus and also other kinds of pathogens. It's an antibacterial substance as well. Then they begin constructing the comb, and the comb is an engineering marvel of its own. Charles Darwin wrote in The Origin of Species, he says he was fascinated with the comb, and he did a lot of studies on it. He said, "For the comb of the honeybee, as far as we can see, is absolutely perfect in economizing labor and wax." So the bees have developed the shape of the wax cells, the amount of wax that goes into them, to maximize the strength of the comb relative to the amount of materials that go in to make the comb. Also, they make the combs are slanted up, the cells. By slanting up, the honey doesn't run out. The larvae, as they develop, they don't fall out. So they engineer it with a consistent 13-degree slope. If you look at the bases of the cells, the base of the cells here fit ideally with these cells here to share sides, so they fit to where you don't waste any wax by having more than one base. So the bases of the cells oriented along the rib line of the comb fit together, and you can see that especially right here. When you look down inside, you can see the way that the cells join each other on each side. So the comb is engineered for maximum strength and minimum wax, a ratio of 22:1. So the combs can hold 22 times more honey than they weigh. So that's a great ratio of strength to wax. And it's expensive. It's not cheap. 1 kilogram of wax will cost a colony of bees about 6 to 9 kilograms of honey, because they eat the honey and then they hang in festoons like this and process the honey into wax. As you can see here on the abdomen of this bee, the young bees hang in the festoons, and the young bees produce the wax in these wax glands. You can see them here as well. And then that wax is then used to construct the cells. So 1 kilogram of wax makes about 77,000 cells, these, from just 1 kilogram. 1 kilogram of wax is about 900,000 scales. So that's a lot of young bees secreting a lot of wax and eating a lot of honey to make that wax. A typical nest has about 100,000 cells. That requires about 1.3 kilograms of wax, which comes out to about 1.3 million wax scales. It's composed of 8 parallel combs, this is the average, in a 42-liter volume nest. So we took a swarm and we put it in this box, and we fed it some sugar solution, sugar water, to give it the sugar it needs for the young bees to hang in festoons and make the wax and start constructing it. This represents about 2 weeks of nest building from this swarm. As you can see, it's quite an engineering feat. And you can see the parallel combs hanging vertically. This is the very typical, well, it is the way they do it. It's not typical, it is the way they do it.